Actually, this one I made it up for one, and I didn't publicize it. I just gave to whoever asked me, and yeah. So this is what I made some time ago, actually, sort of an outpatient management. So I will try to go look at some of this evidence. So this is what I propose. Only three things there: colchicine, chief main drugs, povidone iodine or Listerine gargle, and MDI budesonide. So that is at least the three things that I think is cheap, available, and there's something that we can offer to patients. But I let you judge on the evidence, okay, and the SpO2 monitor. Okay, for those who like...
Dr. Patrick,
yes.
Listerine...
Sorry?
No, I'm just wondering, the Listerine mouth gargle is because you spoke to our YBMK or not?
No, we've been using it for a long time already. But yeah, it's something that we do lah. I just put it in a slide. Something that we do. It's all long time ago actually. All this. I'll just show you the evidence. Anyway, for those who like pathophysiology, this is what colchicine does. This NLRP3 inhibits this place. It comes out in most of colchicine literature lah. I won't talk much on it, but this is where it acts. So I think most of y'all have been familiar with this study called Corona. It's been there in preprint for some time, but as you can see, the date of publication was only out in Lancet in May 27. So it's very hard to for it from preprint to come out to a publication form. Okay, so let's see this one. So what they did was they took 6,000 outpatients who are 40 years and above. The diagnosis was made within 24 hours, and they had to have one high-risk criteria. And this is their high-risk criteria: age more than 70, BMI more than 30, the usual comorbidities, and temperature within the last 48 hours with dyspnea, okay, at presentation, by hematological issues, and high NAC or low ALC. So it's a randomized double-blind trial. These are the countries that is made. I highlighted Canada here, and I'll let you know why. And it was done actually between March and December 2020, and the proper publication came out in May. This is the dose they use, and this is what we are using for the outpatient issues, 0.5 milligram BD for 3 days, then OD for 21 days, right? So these are the ones. So it's 2,000 over patients, sort of fairly distributed, all right? And you see the large population of the studies, people was actually from Canada, right? And fairly distributed in terms of medicine. So in the patients who are confirmed PCR, COVID, you can see the endpoint of reduction was statistically significant in terms of death, in terms of hospitalization and mechanical ventilation. So that was their finding in their PCR confirmed cases. This slide is going to be very busy, but I'm going to summarize where the benefits are seen the most in the next slides, which type of population. So safety is of course a concern when we want to use this. In the initial trials of colchicine, there was some suggestion that there was a higher rate of pneumonia. But in big studies like this, in fact, the pneumonia incident is much lower than the placebo, right? So the two big issue is the diarrhea here. You can see it's almost double in the patients who have diarrhea. So that is one of the side effects that may happen to patients, okay, diarrhea. Now the big thing here, which the paper actually addresses in a one paragraph, is the incidence of pulmonary embolism. So you can see it's slightly higher, 11 versus 2 in a population of 2,000. So here they go and to say that the diagnosis of pulmonary embolism is very underdiagnosed in this population. Best studies have shown pulmonary embolism is up to 25%. Number one. Number two, in autopsy studies, pulmonary embolism is up to 50%. So they felt that not much investigations was done on this population to justify that colchicine actually causes harm. That was the paper, and there was always a systemic review that was published last year looking at nearly 10,000 of patients with coronary artery disease for 2 years on colchicine, which did not show any statistically significant difference in the rate of pulmonary embolism, DVT. So if you are familiar with colchicine and coronary artery disease, there's a lot of papers that shows that colchicine actually is like an aspirin for ischemic heart disease. So but that's for another day. So if you take patients overall, there's a 20% risk reduction in death and hospitalization, but it missed the statistical significance. But if you take those patients who are confirmed PCR, this is what the conclusion of the paper. There's a reduction in hospitalization by 25%. There's a reduction in need of mechanical ventilation by 50%. And there's a reduction in death by 44%. So that was the conclusion for this paper. And here they count for you the number to treat to prevent one endpoint. So 70 for anybody, 70 patients for anybody proven. But if the patient is diabetic, you only have to treat 29. 70 and above, the benefits you only need to treat 31. Men is 39. Patients with ready respiratory disease, you need to treat up to 52. Cardiovascular disease, as I mentioned to you, there's a lot of papers on that. You only have to treat 25 to reap the benefit. So they have number to treat here to help you prioritize your patients. Right, so that is colchicine. I'm going to move on to budesonide now. So some of you probably know this STOIC trial. And again, this one is published also in April 2021 in Lancet. So this one, it's an open label parallel phase 2 randomized control trial that looked at inhaled budesonide with usual care. So this one inclusion criteria is within 7 days. And the patient has to be having mild symptoms. So 7 days, mild symptoms. This one is done in UK. And so they use budesonide BD. This one until symptom resolution. So no stop date here, until symptom resolution. Primary endpoints are urgent visitation to emergency department or hospitalization. Secondary endpoint is some questionnaires, improvement in clinical symptoms. So about 70 each arm, 70 each arm. Again, the duration of symptoms, if you can look here, the mean time is actually 3 days, 3 days. That was the mean time. Presentation otherwise it's more or less similar. Okay, so all oxygens are 96, 95, quite mild patients. Again, this one also was stopped early. They couldn't see any benefit carrying on. July to December 2020. They have 2 arms here, per protocol population and intention to treat population. These are population that actually sort of at least received at least 1 dose of the drug and came for follow-up. So, and these were the patients they actually randomized. Actually, not much difference just slightly, few numbers different, so not much of thing. But you can see the benefits. It's all statistically significant. The primary endpoints that I just mentioned to you, which was the visitation to the hospitalization, and the secondary endpoint is a clinical improvement. So primary endpoint, you can see the marked difference now, 1% in budesonide, 14% in the usual care. They have number to treat for you here, so it's only 8. So if you give them in the mild symptoms, you only need to treat 8. You get all these mild benefit, clinical recovery 1 day earlier. Fever, mean population of days of fever in the first 14 days, much lower in the budesonide group. Use of antipyretic medication is much less, almost half of the control group. And persistent symptoms at day 14 and day 28 is much less in the budesonide versus the usual care. Okay, these are all clinical symptom score which all showed benefit favoring the budesonide group. So this is one of the graph here, probability of clinical recovery. So that is the STOIC trial. Then this one came out recently in this one. I think the full paper is not out. This group principal trial. I think they conduct all these big trials. and they actually finished their study on that, and the title of the study is budesonide shortens recovery time in patient not admitted to the hospital. Sorry, this was their conclusion. Again, I don't have the full paper. I think it's not out yet, the full paper, but this is the interim analysis based on data collected up to 25 March 2021. 700 patients in the budesonide group, again for 14 days. This one they gave for 14 days, and 1,028 in the usual care. So median time to self-reported recovery for people taking inhaled budesonide is 3 days shorter than the usual care. And when they looked at time to recovery in the first 14 days post-randomization, and those who remain well until 28 days, it was significant in the budesonide group. So about 32% versus 22% in the usual care. This one, okay, so there's also that clinical score group, greater well-being after 2 weeks in the patients who are in the budesonide group. And in terms of hospitalized admission, there's 2% significant benefit in reduction in hospital admissions. This is the interim analysis. The full paper is not out. So that's the only 2 big trials on budesonide. Okay, this is last year we did a study when we were feeling rather silly. Okay, so we have all these young fellas coming in, those days where you had to admit everybody. So we thought we'll just try this on. So it's very simple. It's a pilot study, just a proof of concept. So we took 5 patients each, and we gave them this povidone iodine gargle. We gave them this Listerine, and we gave them tap water. And we had a control arm, 5 patients, and we tested PCR on day 5, 7, and 12. Okay, so we used this betadine gargle in case some of you want to buy it. Okay, yeah. So this is our study. The PCR is clear. We have no data on symptom resolution. We just wanted to see whether the PCR, because patient was hogging the beds those days. You want negative only can discharge. So in our study, we saw with povidone iodine it cleared at day 5, and it remained so until then. Second in line was Listerine. Listerine cleared much faster than tap water, and control arm took about up to 17 days to clear. So average time to clear was 14 to 17 days. I make no claims on symptom resolution. I'm just showing you PCR clearance with these gargles. Okay, this is the I chose this paper because this is the most outlandish paper that was published in January 2021. I see whether this was Scopus or WOS. No, it was actually only found in Google Scholar, and it's actually from Bangladesh, and it's a pathology paper shared by Bangladeshi pathology. I just want to show you what they found. So what they did, they took 1,000 over patients from February 2020 to August 2020 in Bangladesh. And these patients all are middle class. They don't want to come to hospital. They're well enough to stay at home. So they did all telemedicine service, and they included patients who test was positive on day 1. They just have all these mild symptoms, fever, sore throat, diarrhea. They even mentioned shortness of breath. And the age group between 10 to 90. Okay, but these are people who wants to stay home kind of thing. I won't go to the nitty gritty because the formulation is here. If anybody is one, but most of the time in all povidone iodine papers, you will be having all these 30-second gargle, back throat, and then throw it out. This one I wanted to show you. They even put povidone iodine through the nostril and also in each eye. It's done 4 hourly for 4 weeks. 4 hourly for 4 weeks. In case you're wondering why 4 weeks keep popping up. It's a RCT. So those patients, 300 patients underwent mouthwash, gargle, nasal drop, eye drop with 1% povidone, 4 hourly for 4 weeks. And group B are these patients who underwent mouthwash, gargle, nasal eye wash with lukewarm water. So povidone iodine versus lukewarm water, 300 patients each arm. PCR was done on day 3, 5, and 7. Okay, this was the result. Povidone iodine reduced mortality and morbidity. I cannot find the data on how he did. That's all they claim he did. But I showed you because it's published. It's published. Okay, if you look at the PCR rate, those who PCR positive on povidone iodine was 11% at day 3, 96% on lukewarm water. On day 7, PCR was 2.6 positive, only 2.6% positive with povidone iodine, 70% on day 7. So again, if it's anything, it tells you it clears your PCR lah. Okay. This was their graph for hospitalization and death. Okay, these you can see very few numbers in these patients with povidone iodine and lukewarm in their age group. That's the only chart they have, and I'm not sure what to make of it. But this is their conclusion. Mortality is 0.66 in povidone iodine group and 5.66 in lukewarm water. Patients who need hospitalization was only 3% in povidone iodine group versus 20%. So that was a bit. That's the only. If you are looking for in vivo data, that was the biggest one. I cannot claim anything else but that lah. Okay, I just want to show you before I finish off. This was some prophylaxis to sort of treatment studies. This is our neighbor south. I think some of you might know this paper that looked at positive impact of oral hydrochloride and povidone iodine. So actually, this is more of a prophylaxis. They took all these clusters in the dormitory, okay, and were randomly assigned to 42 days of prophylaxis regime. Here is hydrochloroquine, ivermectin, povidone iodine, oral zinc plus vitamin C and vitamin C as the control arm. And they look at patients who are going to turn positive COVID, okay, on day 42, either by antibody or PCR test. Okay, so it's a prophylaxis study. So 3,000 asymptomatic patients were divided into 4 arms. Okay. Okay, so it's a bit too wordy here. I'll show you in the graph here. So hydrochloroquine 400 patient, ivermectin 600, povidone 700, vitamin C 600 over patients, age group around young, because these are all these workers, foreign workers in the dormitory. Okay, so you assume like what things to say, they don't have much of comorbidities. Okay, so basically there's not much difference in terms of major outcomes. Okay, but what I wanted to show you here, I think I show you in this slide. Okay, in terms of absolute risk reduction, whether you like it or not, in this paper, hydrochloroquine, there was 21% absolute reduction in patients to turn PCR positive. Okay, and if you look at povidone iodine, there was 24%, vitamin C and zinc. Again, I looked whether Singapore did anything with this paper. Unless somebody knows what Singapore did, I couldn't find whether they did mass implementation. So ivermectin didn't work here. Okay, but this is like a prophylaxis paper lah, right? And there was not much of side effects. Anybody took povidone iodine gargle, I think some of them is quite irritating than Listerine. Okay, but in terms of adherence, you see povidone iodine was 88% compared to ivermectin and hydrochloroquine was only 71%. So in this Singapore paper, conclusion is povidone iodine and hydrochloroquine showed some benefit in terms of prophylaxis, in terms of prevention. That was the conclusion of this paper. And ivermectin didn't show any benefit. Okay. This is Japanese Dental Society in 2001. They gave how actually povidone iodine, I spoke to a few ENTs, had been used for a long time already as a prophylaxis to prevent patients from actually getting respiratory, prevent doctors from actually getting any viral illness that the patient. So they follow all this nasal methodology. They have this gargling this, and before they do procedure on patients. Okay, this is the Japanese. In case people want to do their own thing later. Okay, these are some of the studies. So a lot of in vitro data for povidone iodine, and almost all say it's virucidal. and they have all their dilution here. What I wanted to show you here is this systemic review. They say, so of course people are worried about povidone iodine injection. So in this paper, they say you can use it up to 5 months to 6 months in the nasal and oral cavity. You may have some increase in thyroid stimulating hormone, all right? That sometimes they ask you to take a 3 weeks break. I don't think so you're going to take it for 5-6 months, so less worrisome. So this is the safety data. There is some increase in serum TSH in prolonged treatment. So they suggest to stop at 3 weeks. These are the contraindications patient. And in terms of prevalence of allergic rate, this is their conclusion is around 0.4%. Those people who want to implement this. Again, these are small studies. This came out in JAMA 2021 to see whether gargles will reduce nasopharyngeal viral load in patients. Okay, viral load in patients with COVID-19. So these are PCR positive. They want to see whether they reduce viral load. So again, the inclusion criteria, these are all very small studies, 12 patients each arm. So these are patients who are positive within 48 hours. They have this regime for povidone iodine. They follow up for day 1 and then every 2 days and until day 7 to assess the viral quantification and safety of decolonization. In this paper, they found povidone had no influence in the change of viral RNA. So a bit of competing evidence. Plus, they have seen thyroid stimulating hormone elevation in patients after 5 days of povidone iodine exposure and return to baseline after 7 to 12 days. So this is a bit of cautionary paper and didn't show any benefit in terms of viral load. Again, Singapore did another paper to look at commercial mouth rinses on SARS-2 viral load in saliva, randomized control trial in Singapore. Very few number of patients. Here they use povidone iodine, hydrogen peroxide. I won't try to mention this one. I'll just say this is CPC and water. Okay, so this is the age group of the patients. Okay, what they found. Okay, they found that the CPC and povidone iodine had sustained effect in reducing viral load of patients in saliva. Okay, that was the conclusion in this one. So I tried to look any systemic review on mouthwashes. I think I found this in March 2021. This was conclusion by this systemic review. They say, based on whatever they could find, in vitro studies, it can be concluded that mouth rinses has potential to reduce viral load. This is quite a number of studies, in vitro studies, but they felt in vivo conditions are still rather inconclusive. Okay, so they asked for further studies. Yeah, so that's the end of the mouthwashes and also my presentation.